The regular season is now in the rearview mirror, and it's time to shift our eyes forward through that playoff windshield and look at the best case scenarios for a Ducks postseason run. Plus, I'm looking back at the big Washington victory one more time. I'm handing out my final regular season Holy Wallowa Awards. The Kings of the Columbia remain in Eugene for one more year. We're headed back home south on I-5 on this edition of That Show Out West.
This place has everything. In fact, the grass is damn green in Eugene.
That performance deserves a Holy Wallowa.
It's a feeling you cannot explain.
This place is louder than any other venue in the Big Ten.
This program is staged to compete and to win championships.
Welcome to the Big Ten, Oregon.
And welcome to That Show Out West. For that team out west, I'm Ted LaRue. Happy Monday. Happy Victory Monday. Happy 11-1 Monday. This is a Monday I've been looking forward to for a minute. We knew that there were going to be some battles throughout the month of November. And now that we've gotten through it, and now it looks like a home playoff game at Autzen Stadium is on the horizon, it's time to take a step back. It's time for the squad to get healthy so we get the best version of this Ducks team in a couple of weeks when they start their playoff run. And it's time for me to this is a very green and yellow hyper-focused program, but I'm kind of looking forward to taking a step back and evaluating the college football playoff picture through an Oregon lens. We're going to get to that a little bit later on here during this program. Now, after the rivalry victory over Washington, Dan Lanning has now coached in 53 games on the Ducks sideline. Ted, why does that matter at all? Well, I'm going to tell you. When Chip Kelly completed his head coaching tenure at Oregon, following the 2012 season, he coached in 53 games on the Oregon sideline. Through 53 matchups, Dan and Chip, identical 46-7 records. Both coaches went 10-3 in their first year on the sideline. Dan went 12-2 in year 2. Chip went 12-2 in year 3. Chip a little bit better in conference play, of course. That was the Pac-12 back then, a Pac-10 going into the Pac-12, and now, of course, Dan had a couple of seasons in the Pac-12 and now at the Power 2 level in the Big Ten. Chip 33-3 in conference, Dan 32-4. Now, late 2000s going into the 2010s, that was in the Pac-10, and then the Pac-12 out there, that was some pretty good football. Of course, when Stanford kind of rose to what they were doing, late Jim Harbaugh, early David Shaw, but being this successful, going to a new conference like the Big Ten, I think that might be a little bit more impressive what Dan is doing. We talked about this topic during the offseason. How long is it going to take for Dan to surpass Chip? Some of you said in the summer, it's already happened. For me, I said, I think it's going to happen after this 2025 season. We know Chip went to the national championship game in 2010. If Dan is able to make that type of run this year, no question, absolutely everybody's going to say, yeah, Dan Lanning has surpassed Chip Kelly in terms of that. Now, we talk about this being a Monday we've been looking forward to for some time. Well, a couple of days from now is a Wednesday that I've been looking forward to some time because it is the beginning of the early signing period. It is early signing day, and I've got a special edition of TSOW coming your way. We are going to break down and evaluate every single signee. Where do they fit? Can they be an instant impact performer like some of the guys from the class of 2025? Also, we've got some signee interviews. Bryson Beaver, the 4-star quarterback, he's booked. He's going to be on the show. Xavier Larice, a 4-star defensive back from Florida, he's going to be on the show, working out the finer details with 4-star linebacker Braylon Hodge as well. So it is going to be a jam-packed program to look forward at the class of 2026. And now with Mark Stoops being fired over at Kentucky, Will Stein, the Kentucky native, has his name is kind of creeping up in that search, as well as Brian Hartline right now. So we've got Tosh Lupoi over at Cal. We've got Will Stein at Kentucky. We've got both coordinators with ties to these respective coaching openings. That's something to kind of keep an eye on here over the next couple of days. Of course, Will grew up a Kentucky fan. His dad played for UK in the 1980s. He played at Louisville because apparently the story goes he did not get a preferred walk-on offer in Lexington. So that's a job I think that maybe means a lot to Will Stein. Not the easiest job to certainly kick off your head coaching career, as that's towards the bottom of the prestige list, certainly in the Southeastern Conference. Okay, let's wrap up the Washington game, a 26-14 victory for the Ducks over the Huskies. Let's hand out some hardware. Our Holy Wallowa Awards. We begin with our honorable mentions. Here is where I want to begin, man. I thought pass protection as a whole was awesome. Now, I talked about it in my Saturday reaction. Hey, Washington really loaded the box. They had a very clear goal in mind. We want to be able to stop the run. But then when it kind of came to doing the other part of the offense and capitalizing down the field, when Washington was dedicating that much resources toward the line of scrimmage, the offensive line and running backs as well, you got to shout out them, they certainly did their job. I want to give an honorable mention to right tackle Alex Harkey. Now, Isaiah World on the other side, he allowed 2 pressures. There was a few times where a spin move got past him, where a bull rush, he kind of got knocked back a little bit, but Alex was right there. He had the highest Pro Football Focus pass block grade on the entire team, 86.5. Well, he's got a mean streak, doesn't he? He's kind of an asshole in a good way. In a good way. Keep doing your thing, Mr. Harkey. But he just kind of needs to harness it, right? There was that penalty where he just kept on driving into the photographer. I love it. But there's been a few times this year where Big Harkey over there at tackle, his emotions have maybe gotten the most of him a little bit, but he did a really good job. We know coming into the season, we said Harkey's a better run blocker than a pass blocker. I think as the season has progressed, he's certainly gotten better. He's certainly progressed as a pass blocker. Overall, I love this offensive line right now. You could shout out Poncho. You could shout out Emmanuel Pregna. There were some good performers in terms of pass blocking up front on the offensive line, but I'm going to give it to Alex Harkey. I think he was probably the best. All right, let's go to some pass catchers now, why don't we? A couple of guys whose names start with the letter J. Let's begin with Jeremiah McClellan. I'm going to read his stat line. I don't necessarily agree with his stat line. 3 catches for 78 yards. Folks, it was a catch. J-Mac should probably have over 100 yards. That was one of the greatest non-catches, almost catches I have ever seen. And it sure looked like he kind of maybe had his fingertips under the football. And I know we can kind of sit back here and we can talk about this catch, but man, it's just the hand strength going down to the ground, the awareness to kind of try to bring the ball back up and put it on your helmet. It just speaks to the skill set of this redshirt freshman in Jeremiah McClellan. I want to highlight one other play for J-Mac. You're talking about the first drive of the game, a 3rd and 7. Now, UW is creeping up. They're playing tighter coverage on McClellan. He has an explosive outside release, and he kind of works towards the sideline. Now, Dante Moore does deliver a perfect ball, but the ability for McClellan to get that release and then tracking the ball over his shoulder, kind of twisting his body, being aware of where he is on the sideline was a very veteran move. It was really showed off maybe a veteran presence for the guy in his second year within this Oregon program. I love Jeremiah McClellan, what I'm seeing for him right now. I think he's poised to have a huge 2026 potentially. You needed guys to step up, and I'm going to be talking about some of these other guys that have stepped up in the absence of the Gary Bryant Jr.'s and the DeCorian Moores and some of these injured players. Jeremiah McClellan has been that guy right now. Let's move on to another guy that stepped up. Jamari Johnson. You got to throw an honorable mention his way. 3 catches for 60 yards. They're moving him around. End-line tight end. They're splitting him up in the slot. They're moving him to a lot of different spots. They've had to move him and Kenyon Sadiq to a lot of different spots because I think once you get to maybe the Justice Lowe's of the world. When you get to the Cooper Perrys of the world, I'm not sure where the confidence level is. I'll just say that for them to be consistent pass catchers. I think there's a lot more confidence for the Kenyon Sadiqs and the Jamari Johnsons of the world as far as getting on the field and being weapons with this kind of a injured and limited wide receiver and pass catching unit as it currently stands right now. He continues to be a really tough matchup across the field and continues to make big catches, continues to be sure-handed. And as long as he continues to do that, he's going to continue to get targeted the football. It's going to be really interesting once Oregon gets healthy with Gary Bryant Jr. and DeCorian Moore. I still don't know about Evan Stewart. That's a whole different conversation. I think right now, I think this period where these guys were injured and they still got out with victories every single game, it's going to make Oregon that much deeper. Right, whereas maybe we might not know what we would have had with a Jeremiah McClellan or a Jamari Johnson in this case. Now they've kind of showcased what they can do, and that's going to make this Oregon team so much better once we dip our toe into the college football playoff. Let's head to the defensive side of the ball. There's an argument here, I think, to maybe put this guy into the Holy Wallowa winners for this week. You could probably talk me into it, but let's talk about Tatum Tuioti. 5 tackles, a sack and a half. He had 2 tackles for loss. He continues to be Oregon's most consistent pass rushing options. He can bull rush. He can dip his shoulder and kind of bend around the edge. He can do just a lot of different things. Had a sack on the second play of the game, and I think that set the tone very early for what Oregon was going to do defensively and how well the Ducks were going to play defensively. There was a play, I think it was on Washington's scoring drive at the end of the first half, where he is applying pressure with a bull rush, kind of maybe forcing DeMond to throw it quicker than he wanted to. Brandon Finney had it in his hands and nearly had an interception. That play starts. Brandon Finney has a chance to be able to make that play because of what Tatum Tuioti is able to do on the front end. Right now, leads the team in sacks with 7, 12.5 tackles for loss. That also leads the team. He's tied for the team lead in forced fumbles with 2 right now. It's just like ever since Montana State, Oklahoma State, beginning of the game, it's just been, it's ho-hum. This is the type of stat line we have seen, it seems like every single week from Tatum Tuioti. 5, 6, or 7 tackles. You're throwing a sack. You may be throwing a couple of TFLs. It's just what we've come to expect. So maybe my bar for putting Tatum in the Holy Wallowa winners is just higher. Maybe he's got to have a couple of sack games. Maybe that's just something I'm struggling with internally for Tatum. PFF grades and stats might not it might make this a little bit of a controversial pick, but I'm going to throw in Mateo Ubiyungalele coming off the other side. They put him in a variety of spots, and I love what they've done kind of with their rotation. Right, you see a lot more of Blake Purchase kind of coming off the edge. We saw Mateo on the inside, right? Those tackle type of spots, those inside techniques from him. 3 tackles, 2 solos in this game. But there were instances where he's winning battles, he's winning bull rushes, he's crashing on the line of scrimmage in the run game. I wanted to give him a shout out in this game because even though his numbers might certainly not back it up right now, I think he's still doing some good things right now. And there's some talk around Mateo, maybe he's not putting up the numbers that maybe people expected this season. I still think he's playing good football. I think this is a deep defensive line rotation, and he's certainly a big part of it. So I think there were plays that he impacted what Washington wanted to do and kind of had them doing something differently. So I'm going to give a shout out to Mateo for last week. Last one, it's a rivalry game, so naturally Bryce Betcher is going to have double-digit tackles. 10 tackles, 5 solo tackles. Look, we know there's still some things to be desired as far as pass coverage go. There was a few instances where he kind of got tangled up a little bit, but he's doing great. 1/2 of the Caucasian collision unit doing outstanding, I think, right now. He was one of the pieces that was spying on Damon Williams that kind of made it difficult for Damon to freelance and kind of do what he's been successful at this season. So, and we also got to give a shout out to Bryce. He finishes the season exactly with 100 tackles. He had 80 tackles at the end of the regular season last year. So he kind of took it to another level, getting into that triple digit mark. Okay. when you beat your rival, you're usually in a good mood. And I'm in a very giving mood. It is also the holiday season. So, ho, 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 ho. I am here to give out the most Holy Wallowa winners. I'm saving the best for last here right now. I've got 5 of them, folks. So let's dive right into it. I got a paragraph of notes right here in front of me for Dante Moore. There's a lot to talk about. I think 20 of 29, 286 yards passing. He had that passing touchdown, which we'll talk about here in just a minute, and he also had a rushing touchdown. Look, here's the fact of the matter, man. Dante has been so clutch all season long. You go back to Penn State, he's dipping the shoulder, making that touchdown toss in overtime. You look at the Iowa pass, right on the money when they absolutely needed it to Malik Benson. And then you look at it in this game, 64-yard touchdown, stepping up in the pocket, finding Malik Benson at the perfect time over the middle, and then he kind of does the rest. I've got some certain and specific things highlighted for Dante. I look at a 3rd and 7 on the first drive. I talked about it with Jeremiah McClellan, but an absolute drop in the bucket out there to McClellan on the edge. Like, Dante Moore has such an elite ability to not put too much air under the football. Like, when he's pushing the ball down the field, he's putting it on a frozen rope. He's keeping it as close to the grass as he possibly can. So when he's doing that, it does not give the defense, even if they're right there in the hip pocket. And then when you consider how he's throwing the football, considering how accurate he's also throwing the football, it's nearly impossible for the defense to have time to be able to turn and make a play. Whereas if you have a quarterback that's putting more air under the football in some of these circumstances, that gives the defensive back able to look up, adjust, and kind of do their things. They just don't have that ability with Dante. The throw to J-Mac on the sideline, perfect example. Okay, J-Mac got good separation, a good release off the line of scrimmage, as I said when I was talking about him. But I thought the corner did a pretty good job kind of staying around, but it was just thrown on a frozen rope. It was a laser out there that the defense doesn't have time to react to it. And if you have aware receivers, and if you have receivers with good chemistry, that play is going to be a completion 9 times out of 10. And, of course, that was a completion right there. I've got a 2nd and 8, 14 seconds left in the first quarter. Dante recognizing the corner blitz coming right in his face. Calm, cool, collected, ripping it out to Jamari Johnson for the play and a first down. I thought like they really mixed in more with the run game. Dante Moore I'm talking about. I thought there were some really timed read options, some good pulls, of course, from number 5. The drive that was 3-0, the drive that made it 10-0 on a 3rd down, fake it to Davison in a goal line situation. We know how good Jordan has been in that area all year long. And then the pull, I thought that was a really nice call in that type of situation. Let's talk about the touchdown to Malik Benson. I mean, look at the game situation. Look at the game flow. Oregon was up 19-7. And this was coming off, and then Washington goes down there. The crowd gets into it. They get into the end zone, and it's 19-14. This was a big response spot because if Washington goes and they get a 3-and-out in this particular situation, that's not great. They just got the momentum on offense, and then they could carry it back on defense. Dante early in this drive, and there were a few throws that were a little bit off, but earlier in this drive, throws it behind Kenyon Sadiq. He does not get rattled by it. He does not. And when you see Dante make a throw behind or you see him make a bad throw, there was one early where De'Aaron Hill was dragging across on a 3rd down. You rarely, I don't know if I've ever seen it, maybe outside of the Indiana game, I should say. I don't know if I've ever seen Dante have one bad throw and then you see like another bad throw shortly thereafter. So you had the throw, as I said, behind Kenyon Sadiq. You have this play where he's so calm. You can kind of see at the line of scrimmage. He kind of takes his time. He sees something that they showed in the game before. Alex McLaughlin was near the line of scrimmage showing pressure. He backs off. There were 2 other guys in the middle on that specific play showing pressure. Washington was showing pressure the entire way. Dante takes the time to recognize it. He's seen this before, and now he's kind of able to decipher it a little bit They rush only 4, get a little bit of pressure from the backside, stepping up and then just firing it in the perfect spot in the middle of the field, not too early where the defensive back can kind of catch him from behind, not too late where the defender can kind of quickly tackle him in front, but just the right amount of time, right in that midfield W, so he can catch and run and outrun everybody to the house. So there was a lot of good things here from Dante, but for the main takeaway I have from his performance, just making clutch plays, big plays when Oregon absolutely needed it once again. Okay, let's move on to a couple of candidates for Mr. November. How about Automaticus Atticus Sappington? Oregon's got a kicker that can win them a football game, folks. You got yourselves a kicker where you can rely. If your offense isn't finishing drives, of course, you would have loved to see Oregon finish a lot more drives in this football game. But if you have a game like this where you're leaning on your defense a little bit more, you can easily trot out your kicker. You can easily trot out the Portland, Oregon native, and he can go out there and you can win you a football game. Man, how about a career-long 51 yards? And these weren't like 28-yard kicks. These weren't 29-yard kicks. These were longer kicks in a game where they absolutely needed them. Like, if one of those kicks goes wide left, wide right, whatever, it's a different ball game, specifically early on in this matchup, especially on the road. That makes it a lot more difficult. And then the momentum can kind of swing back the other way of the Huskies. But he just did not look phased at all. He's trotting out there, whatever, 4 for 4. Here's the thing about Atticus in the month of November. You go back to that Iowa game, of course. Prior to this Iowa game, and then prior to Washington, Atticus Sappington had not kicked a field goal in the prior 2 games in both instances. So it's not like he needs to go out there and get in a rhythm every single week. You can trot him out there when all he's been kicking is extra points, and he can nail some clutch kicks. That's something to keep in mind. When you get in a close game in the playoffs, know that you feel good about your kicker, especially on a neutral site, especially in a dome stadium where a lot of these quarterfinals, semifinals, and potential championship games are being played. Let's talk about another candidate for Mr. November. And when you talk about the injuries to Gary Bryant, when we talk about the injury to Decorian Moore, I mean, one guy that stepped up and has had an awesome November has been Malik Benson. Man, I love when this guy gets the ball in space. Just think about how many big plays he's made during November. Think about how much different Oregon football would be this season if Malik Benson were not on this football team. The catch on the final drive against Iowa. Hey, Dante threw a really good ball. Of course, that's part of it. But Malik kind of catching the ball in traffic, in the weather, yeah, that's a big spot. The USC punt return, that game's kind of going back and forth. That gave them a lead, 21-14. It kind of gave them a little bit of a boost, that extra possession without the offense taking the field. That was a big momentum swing in this game. And then when he's able to get the football, I mean, there's like 5 guys around him. I mean, Matt Prame from Duck Territory at 247 posted a still frame of it. Go look it up out there on Twitter. And there's like 5 or 6 guys around him. And there's guys in front of him, to the side, whatever. And he just turns on another gear. He just absolutely turns on the jets to take it to the house. Look, like I said, I've been saying it throughout this entire program. You're going to get Decorian back. You're going to get GBJ back. Don't know about Evan Stewart. But you're going to get healthy. And even when you get healthy for this playoff run, you still need to get the ball to Malik Benson. He has proven to be next level, pure electricity in space. And he's a guy that when you get some of these other pieces healthy, it once again just flexes the depth that this team is going to be able to play at once you get into the playoffs. I love what Malik Benson has been able to do. I'm going to finish my Holy Wallowa winners on the defensive side of the football. I think Dylan Thieneman deserves a lot of credit. The other half of the Caucasian collision unit, 7 tackles, a sack, and then that late interception to seal it. I think Thieneman is probably the best run defender that Oregon has. Okay, I want to go back early in the game. You had the sack from Tatum to Iodi. Dylan Thieneman kind of played a big part on that, where he's got his eyes on Damon Williams, and he's watching him the entire way. Of course, it wasn't just this play, but it was kind of some other plays. The next play, you're in the same high linebacker Tampa 2 look, where he's kind of in that same situation, keeping on the eyes of Damon Williams, and he's able to make the play for them to get off the field in that situation. I think he deserves a whole lot of credit for how this defense was able to play, how this defense was able to keep Damon Williams certainly in check. He's so good at taking angles. He's so good at being able to finish his tackles in space. He almost plays like he's almost developed into almost this hybrid type of role where he comes up and plays the run so well, almost as another linebacker, but he can also play pretty well in the deep third and the back end of a defense at the safety position. So he deserves a lot of credit. You know who else deserves a lot of credit? Jaden freaking Kennedy. Second interception in as many games. He got a big one in a big spot. Let's talk about that interception when Washington is driving in the first half. This was a very aware play from Jaden Kennedy, okay, because he's out there. Now, he's working the near side towards the pylon where Denzel Boston is kind of running a fade type of ball. Got to shout out Jerry Mixon in this play. He had really good coverage. He's turning and running with Denzel really well. Jaden is able to kind of recognize that. Not saying he doesn't need to get too deep in this situation. Instead, he kind of flattens what he's doing and takes a great angle on the football and makes the play, creates the turnover, and ends the scoring threat for Washington at that specific moment in time. He deserves a lot of credit for what Oregon has done the last couple of weeks. I thought he did a phenomenal job at defending Mekhi Lemon in the slot against USC, and I thought this game was just another great performance. There's some weeks where I kind of look around, I'm like, is he the best DB out there right now? And I'm like, okay, yeah, I guess Brandon Finney's pretty talented. Oh, yeah, Dylan Thieneman's pretty talented. But it kind of makes me think at certain points, Kennedy's really damn good. He's really damn good. I mean, he's as good of a star, slot corner, nickel, whatever you want to call it, that Oregon has certainly had in the Dan Lannon era, and I'm sure you can go a little bit further for that. So, all of these performers, you all did great, and you all deserve a Holy Wallowa. I really wanted to talk about this last week, but I didn't want to be that guy. I didn't want to look ahead too much. I didn't want to jinx it. I didn't want you guys coming after me and saying, Ted's not focused on the Huskies. But now that rivalry week has come and gone, and thus the regular season has come and gone, we can now turn our eyes to the postseason. We can look at Oregon's role within the college football playoff. You guys know how hyper-focused I am on all things green and yellow, all things Ducks, all things O on this program. But to be able to kind of sit back and talk more national college football through an Oregon lens and how it affects the Ducks, I think is going to be really fun. Now, I think when we begin this conversation, we need to keep 3 moments in time at the front of our brains because it's the heartbeat of this conversation. First of all, number 1, Tuesday night. This Tuesday night, the college football playoff rankings reveal show on ESPN. Look, I have not watched a single one all year. I think watching them prior to really this Tuesday is kind of a waste of time. It's a television product. It really doesn't do much for me, although there has been some precedent kind of set in these past and previous rankings, which I'll talk about here in just a moment. So that's number 1 is Tuesday night. Number 2, of course, Saturday's conference championship games. You look at some of the teams involved, Ohio State, Indiana, Georgia, Alabama, Texas Tech. You know, there's some teams in there that the Ducks could see later on. So this is a good scouting opportunity for us to be able to kind of get an eye on some of these teams. And then number 3, future matchups. What is a favorable path for Oregon going forward? I'm going to lay that out for you here right now. Look, when I talk about precedent and the precedent that the College Football Committee has laid out there, I think the number 1 thing I want to talk about is the Texas Tech Red Raiders. After Texas A&M's loss to Texas on Black Friday evening, I believe the Red Raiders are entrenched as the number 4 team in the country behind Ohio State, Indiana, and Georgia. And the committee has laid out precedent that they already believe Texas Tech should be and will remain ranked higher than Oregon. Texas Tech has 2 top 15 wins over BYU and Utah. They've been very convincing throughout the season. I know they got that 4-point loss to Arizona State. The Sun Devils will likely be outside of the top 25 after losing the Territorial Cup to Arizona on Friday night as well. But overall, I think Texas Tech's got a really good resume, and they, I think, deserve to be in that spot. And with Texas Tech already ahead of Oregon this past week, we know already what the Ducks did. Texas Tech went out and won 49-0. I don't think there's really anything to change where those two teams specifically stack up as well. And I think a big thing coming out of the rankings reveal last week was the flip-flops in spots, or after Oregon's win over USC, they vaulted Ole Miss. And now when you look at the Ducks and the Rebels right now, I mean, Ole Miss goes out there, they take care of business against Mississippi State, and then their head coach leaves. More on Kiffin's departure and how that's going to affect things in just a moment. So those are 2 pieces of precedent that have already been set up. And I just don't see them changing those battles just for the hell of it, right? I think there's already enough data, there's already enough information for those things to remain constant, I think, until the brackets are revealed. But I think the big question is going to be surrounding Texas A&M. Where does the committee view the Aggies compared to where they view the Ducks and compared to where they view the Ole Miss Rebels right now? That's what it comes down to. I think that's going to be a big conversation as far as seeding. Ole Miss, A&M. We know A&M's not in the SEC championship. Oregon's not in the Big Ten championship. So this is going to be the big decision as to where these teams are going to stack up and likely how they're going to be ranked when the bracket comes out. A&M is a really interesting team right now. They beat Notre Dame, who's number 9 in last week's rankings. We'll see where they are coming up. They beat them by 1 in September. That was a wild game. But here's the thing about Texas A&M. Like, everybody in the SEC talks about how tough their schedule is. But you look at Texas A&M, and they rank at number 3 in the country in strength of record, but they played at 7 of the bottom 9 teams in the SEC this season. And there were some games on their schedule where, remember that South Carolina game just a couple of weeks ago? What were they behind? 30-3 at halftime? I think Arkansas was like 45-42 was the final score as well. You kind of look up and down Texas A&M's schedule, and it's like, and then they're losing to Texas. Like, they don't have a ranked SEC win, and they played some of these not so good teams pretty tight. So, you kind of look at Ole Miss right now. They've got a win over Oklahoma. They lost to Georgia. They're 7th in strength of record right now. That's the battle. Where do they view A&M and Ole Miss? There is no head-to-head to be able to figure that out right now. As it pertains to Ole Miss, keep in mind the final version of the 4-team college football playoff. Jordan Travis, quarterback, injured. The committee said, hey, you don't have one of your marquee players on this team. That really plays a big part in how we view you. And they, undefeated, they did not get into the college football playoff, of course. Alabama got in instead. What about how do they view things with Lane Kiffin? And I think there's a good amount of his offensive staff is going over to Baton Rouge as well. That's got to play an impact. I think I heard last week or recently, folks on the college football playoff committee on the rankings show just saw kind of some clips come across my timeline and be like, if Kiffin's not there, that's got to be an impact on where kind of things sit as of right now. So as it pertains to Oregon, where do I think? Right now, I would probably think Oregon and A&M are really close. We know how close Oregon and Ole Miss there were for a while. Right now, it seems like Oregon would be number 5, and then it comes down to those two teams, maybe A&M at 6 and Ole Miss at 7. That's kind of what my gut tells me right now as far as these rankings are concerned right now. Oregon at 5. We'll get to that here in just a little bit. But now I want to talk about when you look at all of these teams in the playoff at this moment in time, I look at like a Georgia team with Gunnar Stockton. I mean, yeah, he's a pretty good quarterback, but they've played in a lot of like 16-9 over Georgia Tech. And there's been a lot of games this year where they've been in a little bit of trouble and they've found their way out. They've found their way out of this deal, but Georgia as a whole doesn't really scare me that much. We'll talk about Texas Tech here in just a little bit, and we talk about the Ole Misses of the world. Like Oklahoma is a team with a really good defense, but the offense, kind of like last year, it just doesn't have that boost. It doesn't have that oomph. I think the Notre Dame is a little bit of a scary team. I'd like to be on the opposite side of the bracket of the Fighting Irish. That's a team that can run the football. They've got some good quarterback play. That's a team outside of Oregon. I think that's a team that's really getting hot at the right time. But their schedule, of course, hasn't been the best down the stretch as well. I think the teams that really pose a threat to Oregon are the Indiana Hoosiers and the Ohio State Buckeyes, the teams that are playing in the Big Ten Championship in Indianapolis on Saturday. Now, we know what happened with Indiana earlier this season, but the thing about the Hoosiers, yes, they're a threat. Yes, they're a really good team, both on offense and defense. But Oregon's been there and done that. They've seen that. They've gone toe-to-toe on a football field with Indiana, facing off with them a second time, and the Hoosiers playing in an extra game, depending on where they land and how that game on Saturday goes, could be a little bit of a benefit for Oregon as well down the road. But as it pertains to Ohio State, I mean, it's interesting about the Buckeyes. They're a pretty different team than last year as far as like the offense goes. Remember last year, Will Howard I thought was a good quarterback. They've got a better quarterback with Julian Sayin this year. Their run game, Quinshon Judkins ain't walking through that door. Trevion Henderson ain't walking through that door. That's not happening. Bo Jackson, he's getting better as a true freshman running back there, but this is not a run game that's going to keep you up at night. This is not a run game that's going to scare you. There's been some teams in the Big Ten that have been able to contain this run game. Here's the problem. Their pass game is probably the best in college football. With Carnell Tate, with Jeremiah Smith, I talked about Sayin already. That's the thing, especially how Oregon performed against USC, giving us some of those big plays. I know they kind of buckled down a little bit later on during that game, but you look at that. You look at how Indiana kind of carved them on some of the shorter and the medium stuff. Like, that's one thing that's in the back of my mind. I know Oregon's pass defense is improved. How much have they been improved? I think Oregon can defend really well against the Ohio State run game. I just don't know how much better they've gotten against that talent. And we all know what happened last New Year's Day and what that talent, specifically number 4, was able to do in that type of matchup. And like their defense, I mean, they've got NFL guys in the D-line. Arvell Reese is a freaking stud at linebacker. Downs, Igbinosin and Matthews at the corners. Like, it's all over. I don't know how much success Oregon could have from an offensive perspective against that Ohio State defense. Okay. I want to end this with maybe my preference for the path. I was all aboard the 6 seed express. I'll be like, okay, let's avoid the number 1 Ohio State Buckeyes as long as we possibly can until the national championship game. Okay? And part of me still kind of believes that, but I think now I'm all aboard the 5 seed express, and it maybe has more to do with the quarterfinals than anything. I talk Ohio State and Indiana, the number 1 and number 2 teams in the country. They're going to be there. I don't know if one team is going to be the 3 seed or the 2 seed, and then, of course, the winner is going to be number 1, or how that's all going to play out. And we know Georgia. Look, I said Georgia. Like, they're not an outstanding team, but this is still a Kirby Smart team. This is still going to be a challenge, of course, for Oregon. I look at that Texas Tech team, and if Georgia and Texas Tech are able to win their conference championship games, it sets up the Big Ten champion as number 1, likely the SEC champion as number 2, the Big Ten runner-up as number 3. Whether it's Ohio State or Indiana, that's a tough quarterfinal matchup. I feel much better playing Texas Tech in the quarterfinals, and I think these first 2 games of a playoff run, it's all about building momentum. It's all about building confidence. Look, once you get to the Final Four, if you want to win the Natty, you got to go through Ohio State at some point in time. Right? That's what you got to do. You got to do it at some point in time. As the 5, they would meet up with the number 1 in the college football playoff semifinals. But at that time, you'd have 2 games against the G5 winner, most likely they're at the number 12 seed, and Texas Tech at the number 4. It's the cleanest path, dare I say, the Penn State path to get to the college football playoff semifinals at that point in time. Give me the 5. Give me the 6. Maybe I'm pushing a little bit more towards the 5 right now so that when you get to that semifinals, you've built more confidence because of otherwise the 6 might be a little bit more of a difficult matchup in the quarterfinals at that moment in time. It is a clearer path to the semifinals. At least that's the way I view it. Oh, man, I am so excited for these playoffs. I'm ready to get hurt again. I am ready to get hurt again. I'm sure you guys that have been lifelong fans are, well, you're ready to get hurt again as well. Another edition of TSOW is in the books. Our big signing day show is coming up on Wednesday night, so make sure you stay tuned for that. Until then, I'm Ted the Brew. This has been That Show Out West.